I can't remember when this view formed, but one of the lessons or one of the perspectives I gained, maybe just kind of emerged out of all the other views I've had, is kind of like a sense-making approach to the world, economics, entertainment, technology. And it took me a while to realize this, but humans live by narratives. And what I mean by that is that logic is one narrative. Science is a narrative. If you have a bunch of dots on a piece of paper, narratives is simply the story you tell of how you connect them to achieve, to explain something away. And I know it sounds really abstract because I'm still kind of struggling in articulating it, but I've realized like money, for example, that's a narrative. That's not a real thing. That's an abstraction we all collectively tell ourselves. We convince each other that it's worth believing. We all collectively believe it, and we proceed as if it's a real thing. $1 is a piece of paper that has some shit drawn on it. It doesn't have any value in the physical world, right? I mean, you're an economist. I don't mean to sound condescending at all, but
no, definitely.
It's like, I'm beating a dead horse, but it has value because we collectively choose to believe the narrative that it has value, and we explain it in a way, an abstraction. And at any given moment, there are competing narratives, and the things that win out sometimes are just the people that can tell the best story about something. It's not that they're more accurate than you. It's not that they're more scientific. They know more than you. They went to better schools. Sometimes going to a better school is part of the narrative that sells it in the first place. Yeah. And it took me a while just to realize, man, that this world is just a bunch of narratives. Humanity is just civilization. Is just a bunch of narratives we tell ourselves. And there's people, organizations, and companies that are really good at architecting narratives. Yeah. Another thing along those lines, kind of going in the other direction, is I lost a ton of hope in the scientific community. So 2-3 years ago, I did this project, this concept. I design these speculative concepts all the time. And one of them is the Google Scholar one, which is how do you know a scientific article is true or not, right? So I designed this little extension for your browser that runs it against a database and says, hey, this article, it was proven, it was retracted from the Journal of Science or something, so take it with a grain of salt. In the process of researching that project, man, I found some things that completely shook my confidence in the scientific institution, not the scientific process, right? I'm not saying science is wrong, but Nature is probably the most, if not the most, one of the most acclaimed and accredited publications in science in that world. There was an ex-director, ex-vice president or something of the sort who once joked that the way we determine which studies get published is we stand on top of the staircase with a stack of them, we throw them down, and whichever one gets to the bottom, we throw it in. And politics are everywhere. Politics are everywhere. Every time you have two humans interacting, politics are at play. We love to believe this narrative that the scientific world is objective and everything is peer reviewed. But when you look into it, man, the whole shit is rotten. Peer review is bullshit. You have all these actors that are acting in self-interest, right? Yeah. One part that people often forget is that when you put out a study, in theory, it should be peer-reviewed, right? Yeah. But when you look at the economics, the game theory of it all is, in order for you to peer-review my article, you're going to spend 2 months replicating my experiment. Those are 2 months that you're not investing in your own career, creating your own original work that's going to advance you. So nobody wants to really peer review. Like, you're not incentivized to peer review,
nobody wants to be that guy, yeah.
And then there's just layers upon layers, man. You could probably Google and look deeper for yourself, but I lost a lot of credibility, especially there was this crisis in psychology. They found out something like over half of all psychology studies could not be replicated. They actually got a team of people to try to replicate it, could not. So even science, right? Even something as objective as science, medicine, take it with a grain of salt, man. Yeah. I think it goes back nicely to what you were saying. If anybody's telling you they got all the answers, they're full of shit. Yeah. And Yeah, that's probably I'm gonna leave it at that. But the narrative thing really stuck with me, man. We believe stories.
Yeah, I think anybody, like you said, that's a great way to sum it up. Everybody's got their story, and people have good reasons for their story. But in the end, you should always be skeptical and always ask the questions. All comes down to that Socratic method.
Yeah.
Just keep asking questions about it because you're gonna figure out hopefully enough that you can make a balanced decision on it.
Yeah, and actually one of the points, one of the pillars of that belief stemmed from a conversation you and I had about wealth. I don't know if you recall, it was like maybe last year, we really deep dove into wealth. Like what is wealth, right? Like how can wealth grow? It's not a real thing, but we talk about it all the time. And at the end of the day, that's also a story we tell. It's just this pie that's ever growing, and you generate wealth. But how can you generate wealth? It's like this abstract, renewable resource. It seems right that I don't know.
Well, you can always accumulate more material things, right? So you could say that's wealth, is having more material things, more things available to you, more services, more goods. That's a way to quantify wealth, right?
But in the information age, doesn't get a bit trickier.
Yeah, there's also intangibles to wealth.
That's what I was getting at.
Like if you have a community like we were talking about before, where you lived next to all your neighbors and you had the high school team you rooted for, and that community gets gutted. That's a kind of wealth that's intangible, right? The wealth of that good feeling that comes from that close community, and feeling like these are my people and these are this is where I live.
I see what you're getting at. Yeah.
Yeah. So wealth, like you said, it's a narrative. Is what's a narrative I tell myself about wealth. There's people who are poor who feel like they're wealthy. There's people who are rich who are miserable. So material accumulation, I think, is not wealth. Definitely, I think, like you said, it comes down to narratives. What do you tell yourself about what you have?
And I've seen services, which is really inspiring. People coming up with services to provide and to offer to other businesses that are, I don't want to say bullshit, but just don't seem that valuable. And at the end of the day, you ask yourself, like, how can I create a company that's generating money? And the answer is you just have to convince people that it's worth X amount of dollars. Like, it doesn't have to be worth that much.
Yeah.
You just literally have to convince them. Like, if you took a bunch of sacred crystals from Egypt and you knocked on somebody's office and you said, hey, for $1,200, I'm going to go and spread good luck through your office carpets. If you can convince the owner that narrative is believable, you got a business.
Yeah.
And that's kind of inspiring, man, that, the entrepreneurial side of me is inspired by the fucking endless possibilities. It kind of liberated me and gave me this confidence when I realized, like, dude, everybody else is like bullshitting more or less to some degree. That if you could sell something with a story, then that's what justifies its value, not its inherent value, right? The best people for a job aren't always the best. They just sell themselves the best.
Yeah, I mean, my counterpoint to that would be, that's why I believe strongly in institution building, is so that we can do that. We should, create things, and, that's what life is all about, doing something, right? Yeah. But that we have a set of morals and ethics that guide it, right? We don't want people selling snake oil, telling somebody, if you drink this, you'll live forever, and getting hundreds of thousands of dollars from them. Because you can, deliver the narrative, and there's some people who are very charismatic, convincing at it. But for me, what's important is, you take away the ability for narratives to run away with themselves and hurt people. Right?
I think what you just described is a beautiful example of my theory, is that there's people that crafted a narrative that is illogical, not scientific, yet they found people to believe and subscribe to it, monetarily wise in some cases.
Yeah.
And that just shows you that it's not about science, it's not about logic and economics. Sometimes it's about emotions and narratives.
Yeah, and we want people to enjoy narrative. I mean, if you do view life like that, there's a lot of narratives that, are just the way people want to live, and that's fine. But we should try to build society that if we have that recognition that the marketing of something is super important, we have to make sure, especially as there's more available and there's more people, like you said, micro-influencers and all these people telling different stories, that it's done in a way that's ethical and ensures that we don't, shoot ourselves in the foot while doing it.
That's a layer on top. But the word you just use is marketing. And marketing, professionally speaking, as somebody, who works in startups and companies, marketing a lot of times is intangible. Meaning, I mean, you could quantify your results, but essentially you're convincing somebody that I'm going to do a bunch of things for you, and I can't promise you they're going to directly and obviously help your company sell a product, but you somehow believe that they must help, so it justifies my salary, right? Marketing, I think, is a really good example of that, because not every single thing is quantifiable. For example, I'm giving you 1,000 Instagram eyes laid on your posts. How valuable is that? I mean, maybe some of them convert, but maybe it's not because of my efforts, right? It's this intangible, indirect consequence, which we all generally agree is a desirable thing. And that's a position, and that's paid, and you can actually work in marketing in certain areas are definitely quantifiable, certain are more questionable. And I see it, it's certain professions are not directly, obviously contributing to the wealth or the well-being of a company, but they're there anyways.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, definitely. It makes sense. And like you said, that's times what helps sustain certain things, that you're able to tell the right story about it, right?
Yeah.
That's in itself, useful in a way.
I've seen people thrive. I've been in situations where, this is more going to the literal side of narratives, but I've seen companies being sold for $1 billion and having no technical verification by independent third parties that their claims are true. Actually, contrary. There's been a lot of cases where, without naming companies, but where it's been proven they're bullshitting.
Yeah.
But for some weird reason, customers believe them. I mean, it's not illegal, right? It's like stretching the truth and bending narratives. But
there's unbelievable. I mean, it's becoming a whole genre. I don't know if you've heard some of these podcasts about fraudsters, or not necessarily fully fraudsters, but people who, what's that company led by Elizabeth Holmes?
Theranos.
Yeah, Theranos. Theranos is a great example of where,
say less.
Yeah.
I mean, right there.
Yeah.
Dude, that is the best example of a narrative in play. Here's a company with a product that the professionals, the scientists are telling you this is not possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Henry Kissinger and some of the most respectable members of our society are throwing money at something that is seemingly impossible.
Yeah. You have Walgreens, a highly respected corporation, doing
Buying it.
You didn't only convince, you convinced just such a range of people by spreading this narrative. Powerful people, smart people, rational people.
Yeah.
And just with the right narrative, you got them all on board. And that should give pause to anybody who thinks that, just because somebody's got a bunch of titles or experience that they're, any more qualified to make a decision. I mean, I don't want to take away, the role of experts.
No, but your general sentiment holds true. Like if I came to you and I was like, "Hey Mason, I got a crazy investment opportunity."
Yeah.
Some of the investors are Henry Kissinger.
Yeah.
And then the other general.
I'd be like, "Oh shit."
The CEO is from Stanford.
Yeah.
And you know who's in the board of advisors? Another professor from Stanford.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
how can you? That's such a powerful story.
Yeah.
How do you turn that down? You can't. No reasonable person is like, yeah, something's fishy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, that's actually that's probably the best example to leave it at, right? Like narratives are everything, man. And it took me a long time, and it's a double-edged sword because it scares me because I see the potential to be misused.
Yeah.
Malicious narratives are fucking dangerous, but at the same time, it kind of gives me. It kind of gives me confidence in trying new ideas and trying to monetize products and launch startups or sell my own services. And there's a company, man, that I remember. It's a sci-fi company that if you pay them, and I'm sure it's a fat ass fee, a consulting fee, they will create a comic book and reimagine your company in a sci-fi world based on reality, like as in some visionary shit, right? I was like, holy shit. But the two main people were like, some big leaders in the game. And it just opened my eyes, man. Like, damn, if you have a good story, you can make a living doing anything, man.
I can't argue.
Yeah.
I can't argue that storytellers, they're everywhere. And we can go into so many different examples across every industry, across every human endeavor. And
On
maybe
that
that's what
note,
we're gonna say.
I'm gonna be here telling stories all night, yo. But
Hey,
it's been a pleasure, man. Until
as
next time.
always, cheers.